Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. An honour to be here. I'm going to give you a little lesson in geography about Melbourne before we start. A lot of you have never heard of Melbourne, don't know where it is, so I'm just going to give a little bit of background. It's not Melbourne, Florida. Okay, it's a little bit of a different story to Singapore and Hong Kong, as you can see. We have a CBD in the background, and this is basically the level of intensity we have in Australia and in Melbourne. First thing you should know is Melbourne is a long, long way from everywhere. Right, 7 to 7.5 hours from Singapore, one of our closest global neighbours. We're a very highly urbanised continent. We have one of the highest urbanisation rates in the world at 89%. Most of our 60% of our population is located in our major capital cities. The two primary capital cities are Melbourne and Sydney. My city's Melbourne, that's 4 million, Sydney's 4.4. And then if you look at the Melbourne urban area, it's a fairly extended area, 2,100 square kilometres. That's about 3 to 4 times the size of Hong Kong and Singapore, previously referred to. And it's heavily skewed, as you can see, to the east and to the southeast. And that's just the way it's grown around transportation networks. It's a low-density city, without any doubt. That's comparing Singapore with the Melbourne urban area. Our density is about 1,700 people per square kilometre. And as you saw before in Hong Kong, approximately 4 times that. And if you take out the hinterland or the other area, it can be much higher than that. Most of the growth occurs in the outer areas, so it's very much an outer growing city. And one of our challenges going forward is purely to actually accommodate future growth. We have growth of another 1 million people by the 2026 and another 1 million beyond that through 2040, which is about a growth rate of 1.8% per annum, or about nearly 70,000 a year. So there is a real growth challenge in how to accommodate that growth and make the city livable. If you have any interest in rankings and believe them, and I don't believe in too many of them, but you put them up when they help. Livability for EIU, we're number 1. We normally rank between 1 and 3. The most livable city as in Monocle, we rank 5. Mercer, we rank 18. But then from a global context, the A.T. Kearney one, where we've been first actually rated this year, we come in at about number 32, which is well down the list. I'm going to move on now and just cover some of the initiatives in intensification that we've tried to implement in Melbourne. And some of these are really planning related and some of them are not. They're investment related, and that's the way it's worked. But some of them have been successful, some of them haven't, but there are lessons. And I guess one of the important things about Melbourne is that 20 to 30 years ago, it was really a city in which people worked. They came from the suburbs, they departed at 5 o'clock, they went home. This is John Brack's famous painting, Collins Street, 5 p.m, showing the exodus of workers going home. It's a lovely painting, and it's actually the most popular painting in the National Gallery of Victoria to this day. So our fathers, however, recognised that you had to try and make this city more interesting and have other activities and not just be a 9-to-5 commute city. And so I guess the real thing that's happened is that the city has transformed from a central business district to a central activities district. And that's really all about the activities and the variety of activities that occur in a city. And this is Federation Square, which is just a fantastic meeting place for people. And so there is the recognition that the city is a 24-hour city. It caters to different people at different times of the day, at night time, at morning, and so on. And that's a whole different view of looking at the city. And it's been all for the better. One of the important, I guess, initiatives about trying to make Melbourne more intense has been the resurgence in city living and to try and get people to live back in the central area. And one of the first things, so this is my initiative number 1, was the resurgence as a consequence of postcode 3000. That was a program put together by the city government to actually encourage the conversion of older Class B, Class C office buildings into residential. This came at a time in the early 90s when we had office oversupply of about 25%. And there were certain incentives provided in terms of rate rebate and certain encouragement given to people to do that. Highly successful, way beyond expectation, a changed way of living for a lot of people who'd never lived in the city before. This building is right opposite where I work. It's an old public service office building. You can see the cream brick, and then on the top floor they've added another 5 stories, again, of residential. Fantastic building, highly successful. One of the important things about trying to make Melbourne more intense has been the resurgence in city living and to try and get people to live back in the central area. And one of the Positive planning is the other thing, I think, in Resurgence of Living. There's a recognition that high-rise is okay. You just have to deal with it. And as a consequence, there is much more high-rise residential in Melbourne now. It can't be better typified by Eureka Tower, which is 92 stories, 300 metres high, the second tallest residential tower in the world. Now, you wouldn't believe little old low-density Melbourne has the second highest residential tower in the world. Well, it does. You've learned something. Urban renewal, we're very fortunate to the extent that we have land adjacent to our central business district which has been able to be converted and used for other purposes. And so you can see on the right-hand side there where the traditional CBD was. We first extended the central area through what's called South Bank on the south side of the river, and then through the more recent to the Docklands area. Docklands is an interesting case in point. An investment, when it's finished about halfway at the moment, will be $15 billion US. There'll be a population of 17,000 people, and there'll be 40,000 workers and around 20 million visits per day. So, you know, it's very fortunate to be able to incorporate those sorts of uses adjacent to your central area because you've got the land, right? And most cities don't have that luxury. So that's the Yarra River, and that's where South Bank is, which is very much a commercial residential area. This is Docklands. The net result of this, if you look at the numbers, you know, the residential numbers have doubled, gone from 17,000 people to nearly 39,000. Apartments have doubled. The cafes and restaurants have gone from about 800 up to 1,400, again, reflecting, you know, the use that the city's been put to, because you've got people living there, people wanting to use it. Whereas the overall floor space, taking into account all sorts of development, has only increased by 37%. This initiative is about containing Melbourne's sprawl, and this is more of an outward lying thing. And one of the first things they've done is to incorporate or introduce an urban growth boundary, delineating the outer extremities of which your growth can be got to. Highly controversial, highly political. Whether it succeeds is yet to be seen, but it's in there. It's really got the capacity to cater for Melbourne's outer growth through to 2030. The other part, again, with containing sprawl is to try and encourage consolidation in your middle and outer suburbs, encourage higher and not so much high, but medium density development. And this has occurred in certain instances and is occurring more. But having said that, it's not easy. It's a struggle. You know, there is a resistance. We have Save Our Suburbs, and I'm sure you have similar protest groups around the world. There is a NIMBY attitude by many people. They like their backyard. They don't like the idea of their privacy being impaired, and so it's not a simple issue. One of Melbourne's problems, in a way, going longer term, is it is a very monocentric city with the employment concentrated in the central business area. So our central area accounts for around 30%, this is within 5K of the GPO, about 30% of all employment at the moment. And if you look at commerce, it's about 50%. So the government, in their wisdom, has decided that Melbourne has to go from being a monocentric city to a polycentric city, and encourage employment in these employment nodes which are designated. There's 5 such nodes at the moment. They're on major public transportation nodes. But again, the success is not great, and some of the reasons for that are basically, firstly, the land cost differential between the central area and the suburbs is just not great enough, right? And secondly is the public transportation network is also just not good enough, particularly trains. So Melbourne has very much a radial train network and transportation network, great for getting the central city, but not for going around in a circle and connecting through those nodes. So that is one of our problems. In terms of improving public transport, yes, we are very reliant on the car. 30% of our workers still go by car to get to the central business area each day. And that's, whilst there is a public transportation system of trains, which is quite good, and it's really been limited and hampered by a lack of expenditure on its just upgrading and on new investment. Probably one of the better features of my fair city is the tram network, which is quite a unique thing. It's very good for short-term trips. About 15% again of our central city workers come by tram, but it is very short trips. Improvements we're making on that is the super stops, trying to make it easier getting on and off, including for disabled access, and also extending the network and providing new fleet. We're trying to become a bike-friendly city, and we're getting better. Bike lanes, bike share, extended bike network, etc. Public realm, a lot of emphasis on that, and credit goes to our city planners there, and particularly Robert Adams, who's put enormous emphasis on the public realm over a long period of time and getting that continuity. And again, it's been accepted by whatever political party's in power. This is in our central area. A great meeting place, Federation Square, the South Bank area. Even little things like the wayfinding's improved. And all this acts to just make the whole CB or central business area and central activities area just more attractive for visitors and for people in coming from the suburbs, so more intense. The grit and the grain of Melbourne and our laneways is an important feature. We try and retain that and in fact extend that. We encourage street art, believe it or not. And funnily enough, one of the greatest tourist attractions for Melbourne now is our street art. Having said that, it's very hard to control. And as any city will find, even Singapore, which I know it's not allowed, it's just a bit of a challenge, that one. We have pretty tacky signage, temporary signs on buildings. These are all minor things, but they don't add to the attraction, but there they are, and they're minor. Events is an issue which Melbourne is not so much a planning issue, but a promotional issue and investment. We're a massive events city, and again, 20 years now this has been going. Sports events, the GP, the Australian Open, the Racing Carnival. On it goes, the wine festival, the comedy festival, film festival, fashion festival, etc. Fantastic because you're getting people using your city, right? It's becoming intense. They're visiting, right? They're coming from the suburbs. They're coming from other countries. They're coming from interstate. One of the reasons why, great venues, right? Massive investment in infrastructure on those venues, which the government's been very much at the forefront. And that political mileage is wonderful. They love, these are real showpiece trophy things. They're not like sewage and, underground systems and so on. You actually see it. And the other thing is they're all located, these facilities, in close proximity to the central area, which means accessible for residents from public transport and also from the visitors staying in the hotels. Finally, and again, this is not a planning thing, but Melbourne has emerged for various reasons as a global university city. That's a great thing for Melbourne. It's come from all the different forms of government. We have old institutions, we have new institutions, we have new buildings, etc. We're now ranked number 4 globally as best university city from QS, and by RMIT globally number 5, which is a phenomenal achievement. The numbers speak for themselves. Our higher education and vocational training in the metropolitan area has gone from about 180,000 to 240. But the most important thing out of that, which again helps the vitality and the intensity, is 34% of all our students are foreign now, which has gone from 24%. So sorry to rush through that, but that is my city. I think we've done very well, through no credit of mine, in the central area, but in the suburbs, intensification has a long, long way to go. Thank you.